Good morning, Bri Lafferty. She is one of a growing number, myself included, of people who have died and were brought back from the dead. So, welcome back.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. For starters, if you could, I was doing a little bit of studying on the medical conditions you have, and as comfortable as you are talking about it, can we cover the medical situation right up to when you died? And um, just so you understand, I do have a sense of humor about the whole dying and resurrecting thing. So, are you comfortable with me just saying that you died?
Oh, absolutely. I've always had a dark sense of humor even before I died, and I've loved jokes and making light of it.
We're going to be circling back to that before we're done. So, if you could just help us understand what had medically happened and what medically led up to your death.
Yeah, a few things come into play. One was I was suffering from a disorder called myoclonus dystonia, which is a neurological movement disorder, and it is extremely rare. Last time I looked it up, which was just a few months ago, they estimate there is less than 1 in a million people with this disorder. And so it took me 8 years to get diagnosed. And then after I was diagnosed, the medical industry still had no idea how to treat it, um, what the fatalness of it, what the progression of it was. They actually told me that it was not progressive, even though I continued to progress like indefinitely. So they were wrong there. The medications didn't work. And so I took what they said with a grain of salt because they didn't know what they were saying. And they even admitted it. They said, we apologize. We haven't seen it. No one in our clinic has seen this. A ton of other specialists that I saw had never heard of it. People today still very rarely know about it. Professionals and stuff. It is becoming more well known, but there's still very little research on it or very little solutions. So that was the main cause. It caused muscle rigidity, tremors, like it's related to Parkinson's. So imagine late stage Parkinson's that just tremor. I tremored so bad at one point that I couldn't button clothes, cook for myself, drink, and I would also throw things because of the myoclonus. There'd be myoclonic jerks that were uncontrollable, sometimes non-epileptic myoclonic seizures. And that means my body was basically convulsing and I was completely aware and coherent. And sometimes I wish I wasn't because I would hit things, I would hit myself, and I'd throw things, the phones, the cups, the plates, the things I have broken on accident because of these involuntary muscle movements was ridiculous. At one point, I was in a doctor's office having an episode and they had to move me away from the wall because I kept hitting the wall. It also, the muscle rigidity, I would get like Charlie horses anywhere, everywhere in my body that would last 30 seconds to weeks in one spot. It was really hard for mobility. And then it also came with a lot of pain and OCD, anxiety, depression were all psychological aspects of this condition. And another one they have not attributed to myoclonus dystonia is I was an extreme insomniac. Extreme. When people say, "Oh, I'm an insomniac," they have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. I would go 3 to 4 days with zero sleep, not even a 10-minute cat nap, not anything. And day 2 and 3, I was still pretty functionable. I held a career that I'd work 50 hours a week and, still enjoy a little bit of a social life when I could. But by day 4, I would usually start getting really jumpy and start to hallucinate. By day 5, I was definitely not able to drive or do too much. A toaster freaked me out once when I put toast in the toaster. I think I was on day 6 or 7 at that point, and when it popped up, I about jumped out of my body because I was so scared of the toaster I put toast in. And so I'm sure a lot of people know sleep is especially crucial for healing. and your body needs it to recover and, regenerate and re-energize. And so I had the myoclonus dystonia plus extreme insomnia. Then come to the point of my NDE, I also got a flu. And I'd had flus before, I mean, who hasn't had a flu? And I was just like, I'll write it out just like everything else. But this one was especially bad. I couldn't keep food down or water or anything. And I ignored it, thinking, it's just the flu. And that is the point that my body, my soul, my mind, my heart all gave up. Um, I was exhausted. I've been dealing with myoclonus dystonia for 15 years, extreme insomnia for probably at least six, with less severe insomnia for 15 years. I started the insomnia when I was 10, and I would get maybe 3 hours of sleep a night. And then it just progressed to less and less sleep a night, then sleep every few days. Sometimes I'd sleep 4 hours every 2 or 3 days, to not sleeping at all for days. And then, not having anything else to give me energy in my body. I was mentally exhausted because all I'd known was, fatigue and pain, and just fighting so hard to live as much as a normal life as I could. So my mind was exhausted. My soul was exhausted for the same reasons. And my body was exhausted because it ran out of resources, basically. It had nothing left to give. And on the night of April 27, 2017 at 2 in the morning, my heart, I first I basically mentally, emotionally, spiritually said, I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I surrendered into who whatever God there may be out there. And I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. I'm done. And at that point, I heard this huge booming voice ask, "Are you ready?" And I thought, that's curious. Well, I didn't even think that's curious. I think it's curious now. I didn't hesitate to answer yes at that moment. I shouted yes with those same parts of me that gave up. And that's when I felt like really three hard pounds on my chest or in my chest. And that's when my heart stopped. And I was completely detached from my body and earth in this idea called Bri.
So, when this occurred, were you were alone, or you were with someone where you were living, or
So my mom and dad had flown down because they knew something was going on. They knew I was really sick. They knew I was going through something. And my mom has a ton of medical training.
okay.
Yeah.
And
It
after
was in
your
my
ins
apartment.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. It was in my apartment.
Okay. Um, Now after this initial incident, did you wind up going to the hospital to get have a doctor look over you or anything?
Not right away.
Okay.
Um, just because I had no idea what had happened.
Mm.
And even though I felt my heart stop and I, had this amazing, profound experience that felt like I was gone for months. And when I came back, I realized, I had died. And I
Mhm.
felt so long that when I felt my heart start again, I was terrified that I was buried in a coffin 6 feet underground. Even though I had wished to be cremated on the demise of my physical body, it's like, oh no, it was just too tragic on my parents. They disregarded my wishes to be cremated. They buried me. Oh, this is how people got buried alive. And now I'm buried alive. How do I get out of this coffin? And I had a like legit freak out until I had to open my eyes and find out that I was still in my apartment. Um, and then my mom, had kind of walked me through after I started telling her what I experienced, she's like, "Oh, well, I know about this thing called near death experience." And, she kind of helped walk me through that. And I didn't really believe that's what had happened at the time because it was just too out there. But everything was so weird. Like I kept touching the walls because they were so solid. It felt like I was jammed in a sausage casing. Weird metaphysical things started happening after, and I was actually in such a weird mind state. Like, it didn't even occur to me to go get checked out, especially because I'd been dismissed by the medical field for 15 years. Why go get checked out by a doctor when I'd been dismissed so heavily for 15 years.
Oh, absolutely. Um, so, and then even post incident, um, you realize that this thing had happened to you. And did you immediately start seeing a change? Because now it just seems like, I've read up on your condition some and about the muscle control and, the actions that are going to happen to you. Um, where was the turning point, or did the turning point happen after that incident to where you actually started to get better? Because now you'll look at you and you're like, okay, it seems like there's nothing wrong with you whatsoever. So congratulations on that too, because I mean, I can only imagine how much of a hell that must have been to live with for so many years.
Yeah, so I was in such a different state of survival that I didn't realize that the myoclonic dystonia symptoms had disappeared. Um, and it was a daily occurrence. It was an all day, everyday occurrence. It was not just, oh, it'll happen maybe a few days a week or a few, minutes here and there. I mean, I was constantly having to control this condition in whatever way I could, or hide it, or, feel it. It was all day, every day. So
So,
that's how much of a state of survival I was in after my NDE, because I was so confused and overwhelmed by it that I didn't even realize I didn't have symptoms. But it did come back.
oh, okay. Oh, we're sorry to hear about that. Um, so now you were there. So you were still in the midst of having this horrible flu. And I don't know how you reacted. For me, I've always been the sort that once I start running a fever, I start having what I call mathematical dreams. To
Okay.
where in order to wake up again, I have to figure out ridiculously insane mathematical equations, and then I can wake up. Um, when you slipped into your event and you slipped into your near death experience, what had occurred? So we're at 2 a.m. and you felt your heart stop. Where are you now?
Yeah. I also didn't have a fever with this flu.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, just for the people who think it might be a fever dream, I didn't have a fever. It was just I didn't have any energy. But when I detached from my body, I was completely unaware of Earth or Bree, and I ended up first in this amazing blackness. It was pure energy. It, I couldn't see anything. I had no body. I was in nowhere, no place, no time, because it was everything. It was absolutely every place, every time, every energy, every body. Everything basically. And in this place is where I met the creator, that voice that called out asking, "Are you ready?" And, some people are like, "Oh, what did he look like?" And it was just a beautiful kind of um, cluster of amazing energy of love. So it didn't really have it didn't have a form when I met, but I knew that I was home and I'd come from this place and everything comes from this place. And it was just immensely full of love. And even though I wasn't aware of Earth or Bree, I had a thought, am I dead? Which is still crazy because I wasn't consciously aware of this difference, but subconsciously I knew something drastic had changed. And when I had the thought, am I dead? Three monks appear out of the blackness. I had no idea why they were monks, but they're wearing the pretty red and gold Tibetan robes, and they just floated on cross-legged by me with kind of the shit-eating grin, like if you only knew. They didn't say anything; they just kind of laughed. And it would take me 5 years after this experience to realize why they're laughing. It's because there is no such thing as death, and they're laughing because how could I be a thing that does not exist? Um, but at the time, I just thought, okay, curious, and I float back into the darkness. And after that experience, I ended up in this amazing, bright, vivid blue and white tunnel that was filled with binary code. And as I'm traveling through this tunnel, I'm getting downloaded with binary code information. And I'm not aware of what the information is, just that it's going to show up when I need it again. Which it did. And it plays into why I am actually better from myoclonus dystonia. Um, it did come back, but I was actually able to heal completely from it, which we can talk about after the
Absolutely.
experience. Um, After the tunnel, I ended up in this white space, and it's fascinating that you say when you have fevers, you have to solve, these math puzzles to get back. Because in this white space with an ascended master teacher behind me, I didn't see who they were. I wasn't told a name. Um, I just felt, the presence of it. And in front of me is this huge pile of black numbers. And I, it's the only time in the experience I have a human-like body. And I pick it up and grab it, throw it in the air, and say, "No wonder you love creating," because I realized that the universe is created with math. And I just thought that was fascinating. Um, I then move into what I'm going to spend the majority of my experience in. And still unaware of Bri or Earth, this place, now looking back, is kind of reminiscent of Earth. There's buildings, utility poles, kind of gravity, and physical manifestations of bodies, even though they're not bodies I recognize. And um, I changed bodies like 3 different times in this experience. But I tried flying. I slid down trees. I realized my thoughts instantly created reality. Like these trees had snow on them. And I thought, well, and I saw other beings sliding down them. And I thought, well, I don't think I like snow, but I want to do that. And suddenly I'm on the tree sliding down this moss covered tree like Tarzan and realized, oh my gosh, if I am experiencing the reality I want and these other beings are next to me, maybe they're experiencing the reality they want simultaneously together, but they're separate. And I just thought that was really cool. And all my thoughts would instantly happen, instantly create reality. But there was no fear, there was no pain, there was no judgment. So it was okay that things happened instantly, even if, it was not necessarily ideal. Like at one point, there was this huge flame at the end of a machine that some other beings were working on. I'm like, I wonder if I get too close to that flame, will I melt? And sure enough, I'm under there, I melted a puddle of eyeballs, but no pain, no fear. And I was just like, I wonder if the other beings will put me back together. Sure enough, without saying anything, they come put me back together. I even danced with these other beings without saying a word, as if we choreographed for millennia. And everything was just instantaneous and in unison and so full of curiosity and joy. Like it was so much fun. I wouldn't relate it to, people's experiences of heaven or hell. It was just a really fun place. And that's where I spent the majority of this experience. Towards the end of it, there was a barbed wire fence, which here on Earth you can clearly see through, unless
Mhm.
there's giant bushes and weeds growing behind it. But in the experience, I could not. It was blurry, much like my background, and I couldn't see beyond. And some of these beings were passing through an opening in the fence and, going into the beyond. And I wasn't asked if I wanted to go with them, if I wanted to stay. I just knew that I couldn't go with them. And I knew what was beyond was even greater, even more amazing. And I was okay with it. Not like I had a choice, but I was okay with it. The last part of my experience, I was in what felt like a darker, small room and with 7 magnificent beings behind me. Not as amazing as the creator I met in the first part, but more so than the master centered teacher I met in the white, white part. And in front of me is this scroll and it's unrolled and there's beautiful, sparkly golden script being written on it. And for some reason, that is when I remembered I had this human experience, and my human ego showed up and said, "Ha, you're showing this to a human." And just like that, the script got wiped away, including from my memory, and the scroll rolled up, and I was snapped back into my body where I felt my heart start again. And that was crazy.
Oh, yeah, again, well, I can't imagine the experience, but no, like I said, it's incredible that you can go on that journey. And again, with your condition, you said you had suffered from insomnia, so you weren't sleeping. And I'm guessing as a result of that, you really weren't dreaming at all through this whole period of time. So now all of a sudden, you've been projected into this heightened sense of reality and this altered consciousness. And it seems like you really took it like a trooper and were just like, oh, I'm going to have fun with this, you know, and you just, it just ran with the experience. That's so cool.
I didn't know of anything else because I was completely unaware of, this human experience. So
Mhm.
that was the only thing to do was just go with it. And I'm an adventurer at heart, at soul anyway. So of course, if I'm given the opportunity to just go play and experience things, um, that is me on a authentically soulful level. I understand that now.
And again, one of the things that really struck me, and we'll circle back to this later as I'm talking more, because we are going to definitely go into your experiences with metaphysics as well. Um, but the time dilation that you spoke of, to where you experienced this, it started at about 2 a.m. and you haven't gotten to that point of the story yet. But when you snapped back and you felt your heart start up, what time was it?
Oh, wait,
And
AM.
go ahead. Yeah, it's the time dilation is one of those things to where we're so focused on our linear reality and our concept of time and our concept of space time that all of a sudden being thrust into this other reality to where you can experience, days, weeks, and in your case, even what feel like months. And then you come back and all of a sudden, 8 minutes, huh?
Yeah,
So
I
how
was
how did
shocked.
yeah how did your conscious mind wrap around that time dilation?
Very awkwardly, for sure. Um, so, when I first looked at the time, I thought, well, okay, 2 a.m. Is it weeks from when I last remember? Is it no? Is it days? Because it was still April. Is it days? Well, then, why am I still in my apartment? And then like when I saw the actual date with the time, I was like, 8 minutes. So looking back, that absolutely thwarts, any kind of dream because you don't dream in 8 minutes. Your brain goes through stages to get to dreaming. And yeah, I was an insomniac. I didn't dream. Um, and if I did, it would, be towards the end of, a couple hours of sleeping. So definitely wasn't a dream, but yeah, I struggled because I was positive I'd been, away from my body for months and it only been 8 minutes and the concept of time and it was really, it was a doozy.
I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here and say, on a lesser side, there was a you before you had this experience. Then you had this experience. What was the lesser part of you that changed? I think one of the things I put in there was, before I had this experience, I loved chocolate ice cream. Now, you know, we're looking at something more lighthearted and more, like I said, the lesser part of what had changed in you between, 1:59 a.m. and 2:09 a.m. that day.
Um, the absence of fear and anger. I think that died with me that night. I was, pretty anxious, fearful, tired, exhausted, on all levels, and that died with me that night for sure. I don't fear anything anymore, and I am so much more trusting in everything. Even if I'm going through bouts of suffering, now I suffer happily instead of suffering fearfully. So that's absolutely what changed, what died with me that night.
Now, I had read or I'd listened in some of your other interviews that you did suffer PTSD. Was the PTSD a result of the incident, or was it something that was also combined with other things that you were experiencing prior to with your medical conditions?
Yeah, looking back, I've got medical PTSD from how I was treated by the medical industry, but I had a momentary part of PTSD after my experience because where I was just beautiful and full of love and light, and everything was free and expansive and fun and curious. And everyone, was loving and one in a way. I mean, we're individuals, but we were connected as one. And then I get back here and it's dense and people are dark and material is so dense and, hard. And I came back hearing people's thoughts and plants, and I could hear when the plants were hurting, and I could hear the awful things that people thought, and
Mhm.
it was so traumatic to me that that's how I was in another state of survival. While my myoclonus dystonia symptoms went into remission for 18 months, I was overwhelmed with the denseness of this world. And it was really, really difficult. I spiraled into depression.
Now, when you came back, now all of a sudden you have this sense that opened up to you that didn't exist prior. And as it must have become incredibly noisy with everything that was happening. How did you have you learned how to control that? And if you did learn how to control it, how did you go about that to be able to learn how to quiet all of the noise that you were now hearing and experiencing? Because, and again, you can also, if you could expand on that idea, was it just that you heard the noise and heard the thoughts and heard the uh you know heard the emotions, I'm guessing, or did you actually feel them, like you were being impacted with that hate, with the pain, with all these other things that come with hearing the
I
thoughts?
absolutely felt, yeah, I felt it too, as if, it was even a part of me. So it was extremely overwhelming, and detrimental. I also could feel people's physical pain. So I drive past a car accident and I could tell exactly where they're injured. If it was, the seat belt, burn or whatever it is, or whiplash, or if they didn't make it, I could feel that physically. If my dad's knee hurt, I could feel it in my knee. So I internalized these thoughts and emotions and feelings of other people. And so while I wasn't experiencing my own pain anymore, now I was experiencing the world's pain,
Mm.
basically. And it would take some time. Of course, at first I was really freaked out by it, overwhelmed by it. But once I came to terms with what I experienced, what it was, and how it actually was a gift, which would take me a good chunk of time. I didn't fully come to terms with it or feel comfortable sharing for another 5 years, because I had to overcome my biggest critic, myself. So for all the people who, don't believe or, are the naysayers, I don't take any offense to that at all, because I was my own worst naysayer for, 5 years of this, and trying to explain all this other, stuff that happened afterwards, while being a naysayer was absolutely insane. So, it's not it's not for everybody, and, they might not be in the same place, and that's fine. We are all entitled to our own beliefs and feelings. But after I came to terms and accepted what had happened, I then actually dove into a lot of self-healing practices and meditation, and worked on rewiring my brain, because my brain and my body have been in a state of survival for 20 years. And there were things that I just wanted to rewire. I mean, we can rewire our brains, we can rewire our bodies. And so I was like, you know what? It's time. And when that happened, I was able to start controlling the moments, the instances. I no longer got this influx of other people's emotions and pains, and the overwhelmingness of my external environment or my internal environment. In this process is how I actually healed for real, or permanently. I think I did heal from the myoclonus dystonia with my near death experience, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know that going back to my old life, trying the same things that I was doing, I thought, oh, now I can go back into my profession and I could do it better. But by going back to the person I was, in construction, in my thoughts and my feelings and my actions, the illness recreated. It came, to fruition. So I didn't understand any of why that happened. I just thought, oh, well, I had a break for 18 months. But then, after starting to meditate and rewire myself, I got back into the darkness, the blackness, where everything is possible. And that binary code from my tunnel actually came and started circulating through my brain and my heart, rewiring my brain and, my heart basically. And after that, I have officially been cured of myoclonus dystonia, as long as I'm pretty sure I don't return to the Bri I was before my NDE. As long as I continue being this new person, this new gift I was given. Um, so that's really cool. And, along with that, um, I can choose for the most part when to let things in, when to feel, when to try to, and it's usually only to help other people. Sometimes I accidentally hear people who are close to me, their thoughts and stuff. But it's, nothing malicious or, negative. It's usually just funny little things that I'll know what they're going to say before they say it, because I hear their thought, which goes faster than our language, and it's mostly fun now. And on the like physical part of things, I no longer feel that pain, but I can see it. I can like see it as an energy, sometimes within my own body or theirs, and I can kind of help people through what they're experiencing.
Now, one of the things that is interesting that you also brought up, the speed at which we think, because most people don't realize that sometimes what you're doing is you're thinking your thought before it comes out of your mouth. And what's going on in your head is generally running so much faster. Um, Now, since your initial experience, you said that you did through the transcendental meditation, you were able to go back into that space again. And have you also still encountered these beings again that you encountered, the first time? Now with this is, and again, it's one of the things that was void, that I noticed some of the interviewers mentioned, was that you really didn't speak. But again, when we're in that state of existence, speaking is almost a hold on to the before life, if you would. And so we're thinking our thoughts, and our thoughts are going so much more faster that, and I don't know if you've experienced this in that state, but to where you're thinking a thought and then you start tripping on the thought over and over again because it's kind of not getting out of the way of itself and you're putting the next thought in behind it. You kind of know what I'm talking about there.
I do know what you're talking about. I don't think I experienced it just because I was so full of in the moment and so full of curiosity. And my thoughts instantly happened. So I didn't have time to trip over them because I was usually tripping over myself because it was already happening. Um, so yeah, that was different. I have not met the same beings from my NDE in my meditation necessarily. Trying to think if I've ever come across other beings in my meditations. I don't think. I mean, sometimes just because the blackness is where I met the creator and that's where the creator resides, I can feel the presence there. But I don't think I've, come across any other beings in my transcendental
Okay.
meditations. Because
And
it's also very specific to the blackness. I do TM to get into the blackness, not to get into these other dimensions that these other beings are in.
oh, again, absolutely with that. And because I mean, now when you really think about it, through your NDE, you are totally an explorer in this whole new reality. And
Yeah.
so as you continue on your journey now, you're going to be finding that that reality may open up, and now it's going to be new experiences, new levels of reality, new perceptions, and that's part of the excitement of the whole journey. How long did it take for you? Because again, I've listened to some things to where after this experience you felt like really an emptiness out of you because you're back here, you want to go, you want to be back here. And about how long was that period between that experience euphoria here and when you were finally able to get back into it? Just for other people out there who may be experiencing something similar to this, and they're going to feel that same kind of separation depression from having this incredible experience of saying, wow, there's something so much greater out there, and here I am here, you know. What can you
Mm.
give to that person who's kind of struggling to find their way back, if you would?
Yeah, it took me 12 to 18 months to really kind of um not hurt so much for going back home. I hurt so bad. I took drastic measures to get back there. And I was not expected to live during that one. I was in a medical setting, did not have another NDE, which was also by design because had I had another NDE, I probably would have kept trying. Um, I was in a coma for 4 days and I had an out of body experience where I saw myself, but nothing, super incredible. I did not have another NDE, but I was not expected to live. And um, so after that experience, that was about 6 months later, I realized, okay, well, I've got to be here. So, I tried to get back into normal swing of things. That's where I needed a lot of physical therapy. Um, a lot of brain damage did occur from that one. And so I really focused on just trying to, if I'm meant to be here, I guess I'll, got to make it work. So I worked really hard at physical therapy. After that, I was like, well, if I can't get back there, I'm going to get as close as I can. And so I started volunteering for hospice. And I knew that I could hold that authentic energy of joy and love for where that person was going, especially, when people are dying, their families are often, in distress and grieving and, scared. And, the nurses in the hospice, are just doing their best to keep them comfortable and not really holding that authentic energy for them of, you're going to a great place because a lot of them don't know. Um, so I was there, I was able to be there and I worked in the memory ward. So there, was not conversation or anything, which was even more lovely because I could just be that authentic, happy energy. And so I did that for 2 years, but I still had no idea what I was doing, um, with this information. So I was volunteering while going back to my construction job, working, 50, 60 hours a week. And then my illness came back and just was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep doing my best, like I've always done. And then I did receive a brain surgery for the myoclonus dystonia. That was pretty successful. It was a deep brain stimulator, and they put a battery and computer in my chest, wired a lead up or wires up here down to the deep part of my brain. Extremely experimental for myoclonus dystonia, but had pretty good success. And any slight adjustment, I could tell. If it was off for a few seconds, I would start twitching again or having rigidity or tremors, or a slight adjustment might set them off on one place, or I'd start having weird facial tics, all this stuff. So I could tell it was, very successful. That is the part I needed to really be able to go and discover what this was all about. I finally was out of a state of survival. I had gotten past the desperate longing for home because it took about 12 to 18 months. And I was back in life for another, you know, uh, time is still hard. So I went back to work, I think 18 months after my NDE or 12, I think 12 months after my NDE. Symptoms came back 18 months into it, volunteered for another year while working. Then COVID hit and couldn't volunteer for hospice anymore. So just dove into work even more, got sicker and sicker. And then I lost my job due to COVID. Marketing department in construction is always the first to get cut. They, the industry doesn't necessarily appreciate marketing, even though they know it's necessary. So they're like, yeah, you're the most expendable. So I had to move back home. And by that point, I was becoming immobile and just a huge mess. Got the surgery. And while I was healing from the surgery, I got the most amazing opportunity I was so excited for. The top, like, being one of three people to help start this construction branch up from 0 to 100 million in, I think, a year, 500 million in 5 years. And they actually understood the importance of marketing. And I was respected as a marketing professional. And I felt very validated. I was very excited. But it was just months after brain surgery. And my mom said, okay, you always go way too hard. you never give yourself time to heal or rest. Why don't you come home? So I turned down that job thinking I was insane, absolutely insane. It was a job I didn't even know was possible for someone in my position. And then I went into grief for a month thinking I made the biggest mistake ever. Like, why did I do that? And that's when I did some self-hypnosis that got me into a similar space of my NDE where I was like, oh my gosh, I could ask any questions and I'll get the answers. Of course, not directly, they're all metaphors, but I kind of understood. And that is where I was told that I'd be writing books. I'm not a huge reader. I never wanted to write. Like, that's not me. Are you serious? But I was shown books as stepping stones across the river. And I
Mhm.
believe that river to be the river of change.
One of the points I want to go back to was that you said in one of your incidences you did experience a coma. And this is something to where, because I've also experienced it, I found it interesting when there's some of us who will remember elements from while we're within the coma, and there's other people who I'm going to say they black it out. And I think that this
Mhm.
also comes into play in life to where sometimes you'll have an experience that you do not want to consciously deal with it. It doesn't exist, it's blackness. But when your unconscious feels that your conscious is able to handle what's occurred, you might actually get some of this information flowing through. Um, and for you, you'd said you do, and with myself, I actually remember from the moment my brain woke up when I was in the coma forward. And again, luckily I was on good drugs while I was in the coma because it made it definitely more palatable. But again, an experience I don't really want to go back to again. With with your experience in the coma, even though you didn't have the full-on NDE experience again, you were conscious of what was happening around you and what was in the room. Are you comfortable with recalling any of the details of what you experienced? And after that, I'm going to follow it up with one of the observations I made, and one of the things that I tell people who have loved ones that are currently in comas. So, if you
Mhm.
could, what are you comfortable with sharing that you remember from within that
Yeah.
experience?
I mean, it was 4 days, and I definitely don't remember those 4 days. I don't know if my subconscious blocked it out because it was really traumatic or what. But the part I do remember, I think it was pretty early on, before my parents had gotten there. I remember seeing this really sickly looking girl, with blue tubes coming out of, the sides of her mouth. I never knew what a ventilator looked like or anything, and a bunch of machines. And I, kind of saw this from, back and, kind of looking down in front. And sure enough, when I asked my mom, I said, you know, did I have blue tubes coming out of my mouth? She's like, yeah, that was your ventilator. I was like, interesting. Okay, I saw that. And that was about it. The next thing I remember is waking up and asking for a bagel and everyone freaking out, like my parents, because they were told I was like I was not going to wake up ever. And then I wake up asking for a bagel and the doctors are shocked. My parents are shocked and they're like, can we get her a bagel? I'm like, I guess just give it to her in small pieces, make sure she doesn't choke. Like everyone was so confused. That's all of the thing I remember from my coma.
There are certain things that we'll experience when we go through things like this that when we wake up from it, I am incredibly glad that we live in a culture that currently does not burn people at the stake anymore.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Well, and my great grandmother had three near-death experiences, but she couldn't talk about them for fear of ostracization. And to see the progression of the openness and the thirst for this kind of information change over the last 50 years has been absolutely incredible. And I'm grateful too, because I do not want to die by fire.
Well, it was funny. And again, quickly just going back when you're with your NDE experience, when you said you came up to the barbed wire, it reminded me, and this was something I never even heard about until I was sitting in the hospital after resurrecting myself. And there's a myth written at the end of Plato's Republic, and I'm probably going to botch his name, but it was the myth of Ur. Now, was a soldier who was killed in battle, and but when he died, he just didn't cross over. He went into this afterlife, and he was exploring it, and he was being shown these things and being told, well, you have to go back. We're showing you these things so you can go back and tell people about them. And one of the things that he spoke about was that final step. It's like you perceived it as a barbed wire fence to where that's almost like a point of no return at that moment.
Mhm.
He perceived it as as the souls accepting the fate and then
Yeah.
returning back to Earth. And with him, he woke up. It was a few days after his death. They had him on a funeral pyre and were about ready to set fire to him. And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! No, no, not yet."
Yeah.
Now, whereas going with the coma was, I've told this to a few people, and because you also do work as a death doula and you do work in that side of the field, one of the things that I had experienced was I was only able to perceive what was occurring in what was essentially my line of sight. So from where I was straight down. The first memory I had was a person who I now know is my cardiologist talking to either a nurse or an assistant, and they were off to my side. And he's sitting there talking about, well, the next few hours are going to be critical in determining what degree of brain damage he's going to have. And I'm sitting there listening to this going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I'm fine. But the thing was, I'm not able to communicate. Um, but what did happen was I was able to perceive what was going straight down in front of me. And so I think sometimes when people are around people who are in comas, they don't speak to them, they don't say anything. And I'm like, no, give that person something to be able to latch onto to find their way back to conscious. So if you're playing a TV show they like, or playing music that they like, or if you're talking to them, don't talk to them over here where they can't see you or perceive you. Go to the head of the bed and talk to them straight on so they know you're there. And again, I just wanted to really try to get an idea of what you experienced and felt while you were there. So it almost sounds like you did have that sense of the perception of what was going on. As the one thing I did
Yeah.
learn about
So
comas is, oh, we don't actually go in. We are, when we're in a coma state, our brains are never in a state to where we're actually able to dream, but we have that floating kind of in and out of a bender consciousness, if you would. Oh, and again, I'm sorry
mhm.
I interrupted you, but go ahead, please.
Oh, it's okay. I was just gonna agree with you. Just because, I don't remember or I may not have, actually any recollection of my coma, I actually believe the same thing. And even if they don't hear you, there's a possibility that they will. Like, and I love that you say give them a point to find their way back to. I think that is absolutely important, and I think that is real. I strongly advocate for people talking to people in comas as well, or reading, or um, video or music or whatever. And there's a episode of Bones that Booth ends up in a coma, and Brennan is reading a story she wrote about them to him, and he's actually living this story in his coma state. And I just find that, actually kind of fearful and possible. So I'm a huge advocate.
And again, where my goal is with this podcast and with shows that like it is to start finding this common ground to where you have what's perceived as a mythology, but we clearly have enough practical examples of this. Start melding it together instead of sitting there going, that can't happen. Sit there and say, yeah, maybe it did. And as we go deeper into actually quantifying all these experiences, and we can actually apply them, because there is and it's something that occurred in the 70s going forward. Our medicine has gotten to the point in our society to where more and more people have actually died and are able to be brought back. So I mean,
Mhm.
it does open up this now, what occurs in this altered state of consciousness and what more do we have to learn from. You had mentioned that you have become a death doula, so explain that a little more for everybody. And um how have you fallen, and how did you really get into that to be able to present yourself in that way? And then also yeah, just explain that to us so we have a better understanding of what it is that you're doing for people.
Yeah, well, after I, said goodbye to my career, and I was like, okay, well, I've got to figure out what this is what this is for, I did anything and everything that touched my heart. I love cooking. I became a private chef. I did more volunteering. I worked at events. I worked for a couple local companies doing marketing. Um, I house sat, I dog sat, pet sat, and literally just anything that I thought I would enjoy, I jumped into. But I also, my mom suggested, looking into death doula. And so I found a death doula certification course. And while it was supposed to take 12 weeks, I did it in 4 days because I was so drawn to it, I couldn't put it down. And it was self-paced. So I just blew through it. I maybe not blew through it, but I was so absorbed by
Oh
it,
yeah.
I just got it done. And then I started my own business as a death doula, and it, started with a lot of education, both on what a death doula is, which is basically a holistic support person. And death doulas can specialize in a ton of different things. Obviously the active dying process. In my small rural town where I'm at now, we actually have a great hospice. So I focus more on the grief and bereavement, chronic illness, legacy projects, advanced directives, funeral and burial options that are green, low cost alternatives to, your traditional casket or cremation, and stuff like that. But I've actually since changed my title to transition guide because I actually help way more in just major life transitions. So that could be, someone transitioning from this life to the next, or somebody transitioning through the loss of a loved one or a loss of a job, loss of health. And I also help people who are transitioning back into their authentically spiritual selves.
From the you who you were prior to your death to now, did your views on risk taking change at all?
Um, a little bit. I used to do, risk taking, more to escape myself, escape the pain, escape the fear, feel something, that was beyond myself. Um, so I absolutely loved rock climbing, riding motorcycles, um, skydiving, just anything extreme to, find that, overcome that fear and, get this adrenaline rush. And, if I died, so what? Like, good. But now, um, I wouldn't say it's risk taking anymore. Um, I'm pretty calculated. I'm definitely not afraid of death, but I think I used to go looking for it, if that makes sense. And now I still adventure. I still love rock climbing and skydiving, motorcycles, and all the fun things. But also understand that I'm not invincible and I'm not meant to die yet. So my risks have become way more calculated because the repercussions of living through some of the things that have happened, like I fell rock climbing, and broke my back and my leg, and then I had to recover from that.
Wow.
Or, some other things that it's just like the recovery process is not something I want to do again. I've recovered and had to heal so many times. It's like everything's much, much more calculated. Because I know I won't die from an incident. I will have to suffer through the consequences of my actions. So I would say that part has definitely changed.
So you excuse me, you also spoke that you had experiences with metaphysics. And so now we know that post incident, you've delved into things such as transcendental meditation, elements like that. What are some of the experiences you had with metaphysics prior to your incident? And do you possibly attribute any of the things that you had studied then as being helped to shape how you were prepared for that moment when you died?
Yeah, it absolutely helped prepare me. I started seeing auras as a child, and I saw some amazing auras. I saw some pretty bad ones too, but that was one of the biggest metaphysical things I remember having. And then, of course, seeing ghosts and things that a lot of people couldn't, just normally see. Um, and stuff like that. I forgot all the different metaphysical things I experienced beforehand. I also experienced astral traveling.
Mhm.
That those were not pleasant experiences because they were not voluntary. And I was in such a bad place emotionally and mentally that I ended up in bad places. So, but those experiences really helped with what came after and as well as my experience because from a young age I knew there was more than what the world told us there was. The world says, hey, this is what is real, this is your reality. Religion tells us, another thing that, well, it depends on your religion, right? Um, Religion tells us all sorts of different things. And then my experiences didn't fit into either of those. It didn't fit into what the world told me, it didn't fit into what my religion told me. And so having this NDE, it was like, yes, this is the it. Of course it. This is the answer. And then coming back, I studied even more religions to see if, who had it right, if anyone.
Mhm.
I studied cultures and, beliefs and, just seeing, um, you know, what, what I experienced, where it kind of lied. And it's kind of scattered, there's tons of different beliefs and cultures who have similar experiences. Of course, the NDE community and the out of body experience, shared death experience, all these experiencers are coming out because it's culturally available and
Mhm.
we're hungry now. So I can look back and see why every single thing happened, why it happened, and why it happened when it happened. And that includes the metaphysical stuff.
It's it's um it's interesting because prior to my death, I'd studied, a number of different religions just to understand. And similar to you, even after my experience, I started going back into them to say, oh, again, who had it right, who had it wrong. One of the things
Mhm.
that um I was still under the effects of the drugs I was on in the coma when I started sitting there and I was reciting a line from um, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
line, it was saying, now when the bardo of dreams is dawning upon me, I will not sleep like any animal, but unify completely thought and practice. And this was something that was going over and over and over and over again in my head. And again, it wasn't saying that, oh, they absolutely have all the answers. It's like, no, they have a part of it. And this one has a
Yep.
part of it, and this one has a part of it, and this one has a part of it as well. And for me, I got to the point, well, this was even me before my death, but you know, I believe the paths to enlightenment are as infinite as the stars in the heavens. My only concern is that you want to burn me at the stake for my beliefs.
Yep.
And as I say, if that's going to happen, we're going to have a much different conversation. But beyond that, believe as you will.
Yeah.
Um, it is really something that, from one perspective, and again, let me preface this the same way I do to some of my friends who are religious. I'll say I'm not particularly religious, but you know, um,
Yeah.
there are things that you read prior to having an incident such as ours, that where once you've had that incident, you go back and you're like, oh, that reads completely different now. Have you had an
Yes.
experience like that yet? And for me, for my comical side, I was raised Roman Catholic. And, for years, this whole somebody dying and then resurrecting from the dead, I just don't believe it. No, shut my mouth. But did you have a similar experience like that, to where something you had read prior, now reading it post incident, you're like, oh, that has a whole different meaning. And I now have a totally different perspective on what was being said and written.
Yeah. Actually, I found that I was raised one of the Christian denominations. And now reading Neville Goddard after my experience both in NDE and transcendental meditation and healing, Neville Goddard's take on the Bible is absolutely incredible. Like I resonate with it so much. And it's like, oh my God, it's a book. It could be interpreted a million different ways. That's why we have a million different
Mm-hmm.
denominations of Christianity and Catholicism, and all the things that stem from this one God. And then you look at other religions, and it's all interpretation. So I really resonate with Neville Goddard's interpretation, just because it's really about the power is within, the kingdom is within. And that's
Mhm.
where I found the answers. Everything is within.
And how many books in all have you written now since with your experience?
I just released my fifth book
Okay.
last week, but about my experience specifically, my my first book I started because I had no idea what I was going to write about. I was just told I needed to share my experience. I wrote White Flame, and that was most specifically about my near-death experience, things leading up to it, and the aftermath. And I will say except for the actual NDE part, it's pretty dark. I've heard, a lot of people say it's a pretty dark story, but it's very enlightening. It gives a lot of people hope because a lot of people have similar experiences. Then my mom and I went on to co-author Wired to be Dysfunctional, Our Journey with Myoclonus Dystonia. And I didn't know how the two, my NDE and my illness, were connected at the time. And I mean, other than, it helping cause my death, but I didn't understand the importance of it. So my mom and I wrote it for people suffering with myoclonus dystonia, neurological movement disorders, chronic illness in general. And then it's our story of a sick child, because it started when I was 10, and having an advocate as a mother. She's a caregiver, an advocate, and you see she'll write her experiences, her thoughts, her feelings, and then right after I'll go in and talk about my own. So you get to see both of our stories on a beautiful timeline. We thought the story ended there, so we released it a year after brain surgery. It didn't. I healed actually from myoclonus dystonia through transcendental meditation and all the knowledge of the importance of all the craziness I experienced as a kid leading up to my NDE, the illness, things I learned after, how I ended up rewiring my brain, and all of this information that came flooding in afterwards, after the healing, is in my Lead to Nowhere. Oh my gosh, in my book, Leads to Nowhere. That is the combination of my NDE, my myoclonus dystonia, but it doesn't go into much detail about those two. It's more of a kind of a self-help starting point for people also looking to have this, be on the same journey, healing from loss, healing from illness, healing from spiritual craziness, all of that stuff. So it's a very enlightened or uplifting, I should say, maybe not enlightened, but uplifting book. And I put my brain with my leads that are just dangling in space, basically, because one person asked after I healed, what are you going to do with the neurostimulator? Are you going to get it taken out? I said, well, I probably won't go through another brain surgery just to remove it, but I might remove the battery one day if it, becomes annoying. They're like, then where will the leads go? Nowhere. And that was the start of it. It's like, oh my gosh, I healed by going to nowhere. So that is why my book is called Leads to Nowhere. The fourth book came about working with one of my death doula clients. I specialize in legacy projects, and he had a huge transformation spiritually, as well as that changed his life dramatically. And one of his dying wishes was to have his story told. And he didn't want to tell it, he didn't want to write it, he wanted me to do it for him. So he asked. And so I interviewed him, got his story, got a bunch of memoirs, and wrote a legacy project for him about his transformation for mostly the spiritual community. And it's called Awakening the True Self, Alan Jones' Spiritual Odyssey. And then my fifth book that was just released is From Pain to Purpose, co-authored with Dr. George Ackerman. And it's really finding hope through grief, and that grief through neurological movement disorders, as well as loss in general, and how cultures view loss both in death and undeath loss.
So if people want to learn more about your books and the services you offer, where do they go to get that information?
Yeah, you can find anything Bri at my website, BRI0NICLLC.com. You can find my books, my services, a little bit more about my story, some crazy myoclonus dystonia symptom videos, as well as YouTube podcast. Anything that goes on YouTube also gets shared to my website in a nice, convenient location, as well as all my socials. So you can find my email, how to contact me, how to follow me, all of the stuff in one convenient location.
Okay. What about dying surprised you the most?
How much fun it was. The actual dying, no, that was horrific. But being dead, that was so much fun and freeing. Very freeing.
What's your best death one liner?
Oh, ooh. Oh, for people who say they don't believe in the afterlife, I say you're in for one hell of a surprise.
Okay. Well, great. Bri, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. And I can't wait to see what comes next for you. So,
Thanks. It's been so much fun. It was so nice to meet you, and I'm really excited to see where this takes you.